Yo, barely got it in this time, actually, by the way. My name is James McCool. I am the owner of PaydirtDFS.com, and what I am referring to is posting links into the Discord about where you can find this and watch it live. This is going to be a Week 5 slate talk between myself, Mr. James, and Mr. Pablo over here. How are you doing today, Pablo?
I'm good, man. I'm glad we're knocking one out early here. It feels like a interesting slate to talk about concepts. Will be a fun slate to build, but one of those slates that's really fun to build, and then you get frustrated with the outcomes. But we can talk through that. Also enjoying playoff baseball. Go Phillies. Sorry to Social Smiz and the other Dodgers fans in the Discord, but I lived a long time in Philly. That's where I did all my school stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You did. That's right.
So
yeah.
they have a unique place in my heart. So I will be cheering for them, and I did put a little bit of money on them winning the series because I do actually think they're the better team, and they're underdogs. They're underdogs, and I think they're the better team.
I think it's pretty crazy that they're underdogs, to be honest with you.
I do too. I was actually kind of surprised. I thought it would be pretty much even, or I thought they might be slight favorites just because their pitching is substantially better than the Dodgers.
Well, their pitching is way better, and their bullpen is not just dog shit.
Yeah.
the Dodgers bullpen, man, they're giving up 5-6 runs a game to teams like the Reds. Like, what are they going to do against the Phillies? They're gonna be facing the Rockies there for 4 innings. But yeah, where I tend to agree on the Phillies. I think Phillies are like the true contenders this year. I'm not super high on the Dodgers. Obviously, the Dodgers can always get there, but we're here to talk about football, I guess. Football's the worst sport. Not the worst, but a worse sport than MLB when it comes to DFS. But we must talk about things and give people the content that they need. So we're going to be going over Week 5 today. This slate, just from an initial glance, as I look at it, is my least favorite kind of slate by a long shot. And the reason for that being is that I think that there are no less than 25 realistic, really good plays. And that leads us to an NBA slate where in NBA DFS, like, you can build a completely acceptable, awesome, high upside lineup. You can do all of these different things right. You can hit all of the right values. So, like, you can do all these different things right. And it does not fucking matter at all. You're still, because, like, even though it's akin to last week. Okay. So last week, there were 5 really good running back plays.
Yeah.
There was like, you couldn't go wrong with any of like Cam Scatterbo, Omarion Hampton. Who was it? Bucky or Irving. I don't remember.
A bunch.
There were 5.
CMC.
Right. Christian McCaffrey, and then there was another expensive one, right?
Yeah.
There were 5 really good running back values last week. And it's like, if you played any of them, you made a good choice. But then what it came down to is that there were 3 that you literally needed out of like the 5 or 6 that you could have played that were all equally valuable in terms of like GPP usage, right? So this week we have something very similar where it's like you can, if you pick any one of the top, probably, I'm going to guess there's probably like 6 or 7 realistic cash game lineups. If you pick any of them, you probably made the right choice, and it won't matter because you'll still probably lose money because only 2 of them are really going to make money. So these weeks are really hard, as Pablo had said. It feels really good building for weeks like this because you can just build basically a lineup of fucking superstars, and you enter it in, and you're like, man, this is the best lineup that I've ever built, and then all of a sudden you finish at the 24th percentile, 3 points out of the cash. And the winning lineup scores 240 something fantasy points because there were so many good plays and there was so much good chalk that like you just got blown out of the dust.
Yeah, and I think we've seen sort of DK's approach for the last several weeks of pricing this slate, every football slate, looser, and I think that's attractive to casual players. I feel like this slate takes it to a whole nother level. Like in other slates, we've had either value value through injury or a few misplaced plays. But in this week, like virtually at every position, we have like exorbitant value. Like at the quarterback, you're just quickly explaining how to frame this. At quarterback, we have Fields, who both in the industry and in our own models projects as like outrageous value. Okay. Even if you don't want to play Fields, you have like another 5 or 6 quarterbacks who all have really, really, really strong 2x values. Like if you just removed Fields because he's such an outlier in terms of his value, you could play any one of these other guys like Herbert, Murray, Daniel Jones, Dart again. They all project as strong value, right? Where this slate is different is where we had Mac Jones a couple weeks ago and we had Dart last week. Not only do you have that at quarterback, but now we have it at running back. At running back, the value is obscene. The value at running back this week is the dumbest value. I wrote this 2 days ago when I first put the slate. It is the dumbest amount of value I can remember on a slate at a position. Like we have Rashad White, who I'll just make a note, we have him as better value than, for some reason, I think because the chalk builds are like, the chalk builds have people actually paying up for either Achan, Gibbs, or JT. It's actually going to like make White a little less chalky than he should be, which is kind of like an easy play in my opinion. But even if you don't want to play White, there's like Rico Dowdle, who because of injury, you have and then you on top of that, you still have Breece Hall, who, that's a game we're going to have to talk about, that Jets game, because we talked about, I just mentioned Fields, but there's also Hall and Wilson, and there's a decision to be made there based on the chalk build for this week. And then you move over to wide receiver, and you have value at every salary zone. At the very top, you have value with JSN and Pickens, Wilson. Going down, you have Tet, QJ, Waddle, Myers, Olave. You've got basically value like across the spectrum at receiver. So the reason, and I don't want to just sound like we're whining, because the purpose of this podcast is to sort of talk about how to approach this from a game theory standpoint. But the reason it's kind of an NBA slate is because not only do we have Fields with outlier value, but even if you don't want Fields, you have a bunch of other quarterbacks. Not only do you have the quarterbacks, but you have these running backs. Not only these running backs, but you have wide receivers across the pricing spectrum that are all have very nice 2x, 3x, 4x's. So my first question for you, as kind of a game theory guy who has written a book about it and who has started Paydirt, which is a site where we, I think, take pride in focusing more on philosophy and kind of structure, is when you have a slate that is so loosely priced where you can essentially play any one variety of all the good chalk plays, and it's unlikely that all of them will bust, right? And it's actually likely that many of them will hit their median. How do you think about correlation, and how do you think about trying to differentiate yourself from the field when any one of these chalk plays, I really can't knock almost any of these plays. Like all of the chalk, Freeman, it's Freeman, right? Is it Freeman or Freeman who posts like the Run the Sims top plays?
That's Justin Freeman. Yeah.
Yeah. So this week he posted those. He always tweets it like for free. And he has like chalk top plays based on the Sims and then most underowned. And this week, like the chalk and the top plays are the same. Like the underowned plays are like 1% to 3% underowned. So what it tells you is that like all the chalk is actually pretty good chalk. So when you have this much value and this much good chalk, from just a macro standpoint, before we dive into a few key games and key plays, how do you think about your line of structure and correlation to try to, in a GPP specifically, because cash is different, right? In a GPP.
Yeah. So that's when I refer to it as an NBA slate, the problem that I have with NBA DFS, on top of like the having to babysit it all night thing, right? The problem with NBA DFS is that it's hard to get away from and find relative value. And the thing that you end up having to do instead is building out lineups that are constructed in such a way that you eat chalk just in a way that is not the same way everyone else is eating chalk. So this is a very similar slate to that kind of thinking for me, where you kind of know, like if I go over into the optimals really quick and we just take a look at the ownership optimals, we can get an idea of who people are going to
build
use.
structure. Yeah. There's a pretty predictable build structure, right?
Right. So what we're going to end up with, and this is sorted by highest ownership, right? And these look kind of funny because of a database issue that I have right now, but Jaden Daniels, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Olave, Johnson, Marvin Harrison, Trotman, Akane, Chargers. So we can look at it and say, okay, people are going to probably be using 3 running backs. Like, we can say that first off. Yeah. And people are likely going to be playing in the mid-range for their wide receivers, right? Now, this might change up a little bit, as currently we're looking at mid-range for wide receivers. And as we go down, we can see, JSN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Marvin Mims. Like, here's a difference where instead of having a third running back, they have Trey Tucker as a value play and then Rachaad White to make this work. But for the most part, I think people are going to be building out this kind of stuff. Garrett Wilson, Michael Pittman Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr., Akane, Dave Mercado. Man, we completely forgot about Dave Mercado, who looked like a great value early on in the week, and Jahmyr Gibbs, right? So this is
no, Dave Mercado's out now.
Oh, yeah, he is, right. This kind of build, swap in, instead of DeMarcado, swap in Rachaad White, right? Or Rico.
Oh, never mind. He's not out. Michael Carter, people are saying that Michael Carter and Bam Knight are going to split time with DeMarcado now. That's what it is. Sorry.
That makes sense. So we're probably going to see this kind of a build. Cheaper quarterback, 2 expensive running backs, 1 cheap running back, and then mid-range wide receivers. So the way that you get away from this kind of stuff while also eating all the chalk, this cheap running back that people are going to want to use, they're probably only going to want to use one of either Dowdle or
Rachaad White.
Right? So instead, you can play both of them, Rachaad White and Rico Dowdle, and then pay up at wide receiver and pay down everywhere else, right? Because people are going to be less inclined to be spending up at wide receiver. They're more inclined to spend in this mid-range for wide receiver. Or you can spend way down at wide receiver, because we do still have good values down at wide receiver as well, right? Like if we go over here and we look at just the wide receivers and we sort this by 3x, like you could build lineups that are Waddle, Pittman, and Troy Franklin, or you could use Devontae Smith. Chris Olave is still, for whatever fucking reason, 5,200. I don't know how his price is still 5,200. Chris Godwin had a great role last week. We have no Alec Pierce, so Josh Downs is back in play, as well as the dude who dropped the touchdown and broke my heart last week.
Adonai Mitchell.
Adonai Mitchell. Right? So we have like a lot of different good values for wide receivers. So you could pay down at wide receiver and all the way up at all of your running back spots while still eating a lot of the chalk. The thing that is different this week than most weeks is that the way that you build out your lineups is going to be very much so, how do I play all of the chalk in an interesting, different way, rather than where do I find relief from the chalk? Because, man, you're like, you can see I'm sorting by 3x right now, and it's like ownership. Like ownership.
It's all good. And it's all good chalk. Yeah.
So that's one way to look at it and think about it. And then the other way is, and this is unique to NFL, is play all of the chalk and then just have a low owned stack, which is something that I always like to do.
Yeah. So you're getting at something that Tribe and I have talked about a little bit, privately, but also a little bit in relation to NBA, which is, I don't think there's a right answer to this, but there's kind of like a top-down approach and there's a bottom-up approach, right? The top-down approach is you say, okay, like what is the macro build structure? And I think you've hit on it. I think it's probably going to be more the cheap quarterback like Fields with the mid-range wide receivers with 1 or 2 of the pay-up running backs, JT, Achane, Gibbs, with 1 of the pay-down running backs. that's probably going to be the approach. And then with the punt defense, either Houston or New Orleans look like the punt defenses this week, 22 and 2,400, like Stoneman price.
Yeah.
So one approach is to say, okay, like let me just start with the cash build, and let me just pivot off the cash build with a correlation or mini correlation at a quarterback with 2 receivers, or a mini correlation across with like a lower owned wide receiver running back bring back. And then for small field, like that's fine. Like you can probably just do that, which is what a lot of people do for NBA single entry. Like they just use the cash lineup and they just pivot off of it. The other approach is what I think you said just here at the end, which is you can say, you know what, I really like Herbert. I like Herbert because he's a little more expensive. And I'm picking him specifically because of all the quarterbacks, he's like the only guy over 6K that I'm going to use this week. Every other quarterback, just like last week, like Fields, Dart, Danny Jones, they're all cheap. But you could say, you know what, I'm just going to start with Herbert double stack, because if I play Herbert with Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey or QJ, and then I surround that with a bunch of good chalk, I'm already different. Like I don't have to worry about the cash chalk build, because by just doing that, I'm already different enough because I'm using a lesser owned stack. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think either approach is fine. I think what you just need to do when you're done with it is look at your lineup and say, am I appropriately leveraged for my field size? Right. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, and I don't want to bitch about it too much because it is what it is. We got to play with the cards we're dealt. This week is a week where you just have to be very aware that the chalk builds are going to be really strong. And if you're too far off the field, off the chalk build, especially for smaller field single entry, you're just going to be toast because there's just too many good chalk plays. So it really becomes, like you said, about how you combine those chalk plays in a way that's creative and in a way that's leads to a little more ceiling. And I want to get to a ceiling point I want to make in a little bit, but I'm going to pause there because I just talked for like 5 minutes straight.
No, you're okay. So I just built out a whole bunch of chalk just now in the hand.
Yeah, that by the way looks like a version of one of the chalky lineups, right?
Yeah, this is probably one of them. Swapping like Michael Pittman Jr. and Mason Taylor, I think are like I'm not quite sure. People likely will not be playing both Achane and Taylor. I think that very likely one of those is either going to be Dowdell or White, and then you'll upgrade from Michael Pittman or from Mason Taylor up to whoever, right? So if we say that we just remove, I don't know, they both basically cost the same. Let's just remove Jonathan Taylor here really quick and go with instead, oh, this is just tight ends. Instead, we will go with probably Rachaad White.
And hey, by the way, while you're doing this, I'm going to switch to my computer mic because people are telling me my AirPods are sounding weird.
Oh, yeah, they're broken. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So then we got 6,300 at tight end. And so here, yeah, then you go to, you know, Troy McBride, right? Like, and that is probably going to be a pretty mega chalk lineup here, right? And when you build this out, the thing that you then do after that is you look at it and you say, okay, if this is like the chalk build, then what can I do to get away from this specific type of build? Or should I change up my stack? Or what can I do? Like, what is the thing that I want to keep here? Do I want to keep my running backs looking the way they are and get different with my stack, which would be a quarterback and a wide receiver, or a quarterback and 2 wide receivers? Do I want to keep everyone here basically the same, right? And then instead of having Achane, Rachaad White, and Breece Hall, we come down from Achane and pay down at running back all the way across, and then upgrade Michael Pittman Jr. Like, those are the kind of thoughts that you have to think about. But even if you do that, you can still eat a whole bunch of chalk. Like, if we get rid of Achane and we instead then go, and we'll go back to running backs here, and we go Dowdle. So now we have $3,500 to upgrade, and I'm pretty sure that that makes it so that we can go straight from Pittman up to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And if we do that, like, you see that we still have a whole bunch of ownership, and we're happy with a whole bunch of ownership. But now we have shifted the ownership a little bit and made it so that it's a more unique build. Right now, we're paying down at running back all the way across. We don't have any of the expensive high-owned running backs. We maintained the ownership of JSN, Garrett Wilson, and Justin Fields, but we upgraded from Michael Pittman to Amon-Ra St. Brown. We could keep Trey McBride, and we have the Saints defense, and we have $700, right? We could also do another upgrade somewhere. So this is the way that you think about it for small fields specifically, right? Like this would be a completely justifiable small field lineup. And something that I would expect people to kind of move towards as they are thinking through this slate. But like you wouldn't want to, you're probably going to want to keep your ownership pretty high. Like there's going to be not much reason to get way away in terms of ownership outside of things like the Millie Maker or these really, really large field contests. Like for me, if I were to MME this week, I'm not sure what I'm going to do this week, but if I were to MME and go into the Millie Maker, I would probably be forcing one or two players of low ownership into each lineup. But then like, I want to eat a lot of ownership around them because I just don't think that the chalk is bad this week. It's going to be another high scoring week. Just as what it is. You need 230, 240 to win a GPP. So it's fine to eat the ownership and just let it happen.
Yeah. Let me ask you, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I switched. Hopefully people can hear me better. I switched off my AirPods. And I was celebrating, by the way, when we connected that I was able to hook up my AirPods without too much issue today. Of course, that's when they break. One of the things we talk a lot about is anchor chalk plays, especially for smaller field, where you say, you know, I'm going to anchor on this play because like we did it last week or the week before with CMC. They're just so good. They're so like this week, our projection on field is so strong that I'll probably have 4 lineups this week. I'm going to be smaller in terms of how many lineups I built this week. And probably field will be 2 of them, just because I think he's such a good projection that I just don't think it's worth overthinking, right? And when we have value that is strong value, like with a good median and a good ceiling, one of the things that I think you can do to try to beat the field is ask yourself, and the way I kind of refer to it in my own head, if it makes sense to people, are who are your ceiling breakers? Like who breaks the ceiling so hard that they differentiate you from the other ceiling breakers? And what I like to do in these cases, and this is just something I do mostly for football, but I occasionally will do it for hockey and other sports. I don't play much basketball. If I did, I would do it for basketball too. Is I combine the flex positions. I combine RB and wide receiver. I don't usually include tight end because we just don't have any tight ends like we used to that are payouts. Like we don't have those plays anymore. And I sort by ceiling. And not medium, I sort by ceiling. So if you combine wide receiver and running back on our sheets here, and you sort by ceiling, you have to ask yourself, like, okay, who am I going to pin my hopes on at the payups? Like if I'm going to have 2 or 3 payups, and what you're going to see if you do that, I don't know if you can do it right now or not. If you just sort our sheets here by running back and wide receiver and sort them by ceiling, you end up having to make a decision with like Gibbs, Achane, Jonathan Taylor, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's like a handful of ceiling breaker players that are payups. And to me, like in many ways, while all those guys are owned, like those are such critical decisions. And that's why someone who's really sharp, like Kiki, who plays larger fields, to be clear, is honing in on Jamar Chase. Because Kiki's saying, look, Jamar Chase has almost like pretty close to the ceiling of those other payups at 4% ownership, right? You could say the same thing about Saquon Barkley. You could say the same thing. Those are kind of like the 2 guys who have that ceiling who aren't going to be owned, right? So for larger field, that makes those plays nice. For smaller field, I think it gets back to what you were saying before about build structure, which is maybe, and this is a little overly simplistic and you can't do it in isolation of the rest of your lineup, but maybe some of it is saying, okay, if most people are going to pay up for 2 of 3, if not all 3 of Achane, Gibbs, Taylor, maybe you just pay up for Amon-Ra St. Brown instead of one of those guys, right? But I do think that decision on probably which 2, max 3 for most lineup builds of those payups you're going to use ends up being a critical decision when all of the value plays you have are all like pretty darn strong, right? And then I asked myself, and I've asked you this in the past, which is the other part of this is how does correlation come into play? And for me, correlation in these situations is almost like a tiebreaker, which is to say, like, if I'm playing, if I'm playing Rashad White, then I kind of like JSN because it's a mini correlation, right?
Mhm.
If I'm not playing Danny Jones, I sort of like Jonathan Taylor because it means that Danny Jones stacks with Pittman and Warren, the tight end, are not getting there, right?
Right.
And it's kind of like a showdown mentality a little bit. It's like asking yourself, if this happens, what does it mean is not happening? And so I just want to make that point, like that the ceiling plays become really, really important in these slates when you have a lot of value that is all like pretty strong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing on that same thing is that, like, if you have Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis stacks become much more valuable if he's 26% owned, right? Like you look at him, and if he's going to be 26-30% owned, then a Daniel Jones, Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell stack ends up getting that much more relative value, or Tyler Warren, whoever, right? It ends up getting that much more value. And specifically, actually, Daniel Jones has massive value on the slate because of the ownership of Jonathan Taylor and because of the ownership of Justin Fields, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at it that way and you look at the ownership that we have, JSN, if JSN doesn't get there, what's the reason why? Is it because Seattle couldn't move the ball? Okay, the Tampa Bay defense looks pretty good in terms of relative value. Is it because Seattle's run game was terrific? Okay, well, now Kenneth Walker looks like a decent leverage play. Is it because another player on Seattle ended up getting there? Like, okay, cool. But when you say those things out loud, Pablo, as you just heard me list the reasons why JSN wouldn't get there, did that sound likely?
No. And that's why I'm going to eat JSN chop, right?
Right. We can come up with reasons why Amon-Ra St. Brown did not get there, even if Detroit does well.
Right.
They got 100 mouths to feed on that offense, right? Like, it would make sense.
The believability of the leverage pivot, right? That's like what we're talking about. Like the believability, the robustness of the leverage pivot, meaning how believable is the pivot approach? Not like a pivot when I'm saying one player to another player, like the approach. So this is a really good segue, and I'm not trying to interrupt. I'm not paranoid about interrupting you, but it's a point about 3 specific games that I think we need to think about that are driving ownership. And it's a really good segue into like micro dissecting a few things in relation to ownership on this slate, which is the Dallas Jets game, the Colts Raiders game, and the those are the first 2 I want to talk about. The Dallas Jets game, right? There's a decision you have to make around Fields, Breece Hall, and Gabriel Wilson because they all project like fucking gods, right? And you have to ask yourself, I in my head, there's like 4 combinatorial decisions you have to make there. It is basically Fields naked, okay? Hall naked. I know we don't talk about running backs naked, but Hall by himself. Fields naked, Hall by himself, and then Fields with either Hall or Wilson, or theoretically all 3, although I think all 3's thin.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, like, A, which of these combination is believable? Like, is it believable that Hall does well enough that he eliminates some of the value from Fields? That's conceivable, right? That's not crazy. Like, is it conceivable that Fields and Hall both get there? I think that's conceivable. I think that's actually more conceivable than people would give it credit for. Actually, I think that's one sharp way to approach this game is to use Fields and Hall together. I think a lot of people won't want to do that, right? And then is it conceivable that Fields and Wilson get there? Yes, I think that's an obvious, right? Because Fields throws the ball to Wilson and Fields gets there through a couple runs and throws the touchdown to Wilson. They both get there. But I think thinking about the right way to use that in that game is also analogous somewhat to the decision with the Colts, because you have Danny Jones with Pittman, Warren being the primary 2 pass catchers, or going down to Adonai Mitchell or Downs, right? Or you have Taylor. Now, there, I don't feel quite as strong about playing Jones with Taylor. There, I think if you're playing Taylor, you're not playing Jones and you're not playing any of those catchers, right? So, I think being thoughtful about the way you approach, because those two games, JT is going to be the primary ownership driver in the Pull Traders game. Like he's the guy who people want to pay out for. So just using Jones with a combination of his catchers is one way. The Jets game is more complicated. The Jets game, I think, is a little harder to figure out whether you do Fields, Hall, Wilson, and what combo of those guys you want to use. I think that's a little harder to figure out.
Yeah, I look at the Jets situation. People are all over it because the Cowboys have been hilariously bad. But also at the same time, the Cowboys, the reason why the Packers scored 1 million points last week was because of overtime. Game ended up in a tie, right? Like they basically got off an extra 20 plays or something like that, right? The Cowboys defense is terrible, and I understand that the Jets are cheap and that they have a good team total and yada, yada, yada. But I think that there are plenty of instances where that game just straight up does not get there. The Jets run the ball, the Cowboys run the ball, and the game ends up 21-14. Now, in an instance like that, I think that to your point, I do think that Fields, Wilson, and Hall is a bit much. But I do also think that Fields can find his ceiling by throwing balls to both Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, right? I don't think that it's the worst thing to go Fields plus Hall plus Wilson. I also think that most people will not do that. I think that most people who want to play Justin Fields plus Garrett Wilson will do so with one of Rashad White or Rico Dowdell and not Breece Hall. Outside of cash games. In cash games, people will just play all three. It'll be fine. The other game, that Indianapolis game, I think that that Indianapolis stacks probably have the most leverage on this slate. Just for the reasons that we have listed here, I think that it is a analogous stack to a Jets stack. I think that it leverages Jonathan Taylor at high ownership. And Daniel Jones is the original Justin Fields, baby. Like he is the same archetype of quarterback. They're basically the same player.
By the way, bonus here is that we get to pick on your example of a clown team, the Raiders. It's like your team that you faded last week, which by the way you were right about.
I was right about that outside of fucking Genty, who just fisted me. But yeah, the Raiders are not a good team. And like the Bears made them look silly last week for, a good 2 or 3 quarters. So I do think that the Colts as a leverage stack probably make the most sense. Like as I am looking at the chalk and like, I'll get back to your original question of these main games. But as I'm looking at it, this spot right here, this 25% ownership, as we are looking at all of the ownership on all of these guys, Jonathan Taylor is the most expensive player on the slate at 8,000, which by the way, that's not expensive enough, DraftKings. That is not that should not be the most expensive player that we're dealing with at 8K. Like 25% ownership, I think that probably makes the most sense. So that game, I think, is a very easy leverage spot, and I think there's a lot of ways to look at it and say, okay, I think that is going to be the best spot to attack. And we just got news that Brock Bowers is unlikely to play.
Yeah.
Which is
going to make Jacoby great value, by the way.
It'll make him great value, but it also will condense all of the offense in this game. Well, we already, we're missing Alec Pierce. We'll be missing Brock Bowers. We're going to have probably 3 players with a 30% target share in that game.
Yeah.
That's going to be sick, and they're cheap. The other game that I wanted to mention, I want to get your thoughts on this because I'm high on this spot, is the Saints versus the Giants. Now, I know that everybody wants to meme on them, but the Saints have had the highest pass volume in the league, probably by a long shot. They play at the fastest pace in the league just by plays per minute. The other team, the Giants, is also top 10 in pace and plays per minute. The Giants are also top 3 in red zone plays, meaning that they get into the red zone and have opportunities to score. And that wasn't just Russell Wilson thing. That happened with Dart as well.
Yeah.
So both of them, I think, make a lot of sense. They're both cheap. They both have condensed target shares. Everybody already wants to play Chris Olave. But that's kind of my man, people really aren't looking at this game, but it offers a lot of value. You can play all the chalk around it, and it makes for a good small and large field stack.
Yeah, I think it's a classic example of like sort of like the garbage matchup. Like we see this a lot in baseball, like where you see like the White Sox against like the Royals, and the game goes like, it's like 13-9 in baseball, right? And everyone's playing like the Yankees at high ownership against the shitty pitcher on the Twins. I like it a little more for large field just because I'm too enamored by the value in the high total games.
To be clear, I think Indianapolis is a way better stack than New Orleans, but I think like when we're ranked,
but you're going to get them in no ownership, right? You're going to get them in no. The only ownership in the Giants Saints game, like the only ownership in that game, is going to be Olave, because he's just too cheap, and then like a little bit of scatter just because people know and then there's going to be like 5% dart, but there's going to be nobody playing a double stack or like even like a mini correlation. Like it's going to be one-offs. Like the most people will play from that game will be like Olave scatter. That's it. So one thing you could do is you could just say, this is your original, like at the beginning of how do you approach a slate. You could choose that to be your stack. Like you could say, I'm using dart with whoever, or Rattler with Olave, and then with a bringback, and then I'm surrounding that by chalk, right? And that's one example of an off the board stack that you can surround by chalk that could easily get there. And you're right, it's a pace up spot with two teams that are not going to be out, so it's very attractive from that from that context. The other game that's I think there's two other games I think are very important to think about in terms of ownership and value. One is the Chargers Raiders. There's a little bonus there, and that is a late game. So for the late swap people, I've said this before. I think late swap and NFL is a little bit overemphasized as like an edge. I'm not saying it's not helpful, but it's usually the difference between like a not cash and a mid cash. It's rarely the difference between a cash and a win. But it matters. It matters. So it's a little bonus that it's late. I'm probably anchoring a little bit on Herbert, but I do like that he flips the build a little bit because he's expensive enough as compared to Fields and the other value quarterbacks, where if you double Herbert, you're getting different with your build, just like by doing it. And similar to what you were saying about concentration, you really only have to pick between three guys. It's QJ, Keenan Allen, and Ladd McConkey. And it's like that's all you have to decide, like which two of those three guys you're using with them. And across that, you have Jane Daniels who's back. And if you want to run Debo or Ertz across that, like that game has a nice total, and the Chargers have been passing the ball a shit ton. Like, I mean, I know Omar and Hampton had that fucking 60-yard run last week, and that got the people who used it. But I shouldn't complain because I played one Hampton hedge. I played like 2 or 3 Herbert lineups, and then I played one Hampton hedge lineup, and my Hampton hedge lineup finished 6th in the single entry 300. By the way, would have finished fucking 3rd or 4th if Adnan Mitchell doesn't extend his hand and fumble the ball. But that's neither here nor there. But I do think that game is worth just pointing out as something you think about. And then the other one that everybody is like very focused on, and I think appropriately so, but I think like the conclusion people are coming to, and I think it's a funny conclusion, but I'm curious to get your take. People are appropriately focused on the Lions, okay? And I don't disagree. Like the Lions have the highest total on the slate. It's a 30-point total. They're playing the Bengals, who we all know are like a complete trash defense, right? The Lions are the type of team, we saw this last year. Like, they will score 60 fucking points, even if they're killing your ass. Like, they will not take the foot off the pedal. Like, they will run the fucking score up. They don't give a shit, right? The funny conclusion people are coming to, for some reason, like everybody's anchoring on this double running back thing. Everyone's like, I'm going to do Gibbs Demont. I'm going to do Gibbs Demont. I'm going to do Gibbs Demont. It's like, dude, like, fine, but there's 3 other guys you can use on the Lions. There's J-Mo, there's Laporta, and there's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah. And the only thing I'll just say about that game is I'm not psychic. I have no fucking clue who of those 5 players gets there between Gibbs, Demont, J-Mo, Laporta, ASB. I do think 2 and maybe 3 of those guys get there, right? Yeah. And what I would say about this game, given all the value we have across the fucking slate, is don't be afraid to use 2 of these players or even 3 of these players in any combination without a bring back. If you're Kiki and you're playing large field, fine. Bring back Jamar Chase as one of the ceiling breakers at low ownership. But in smaller field, just play Gibbs. And yes, if you want to play Gibbs Demont together, fine. But I also think you can play JMO. JMO's like fucking unknown. Like I'm skipping to the end of our thing, but JMO's like my sneaky play this week. I'm like, hey, like what happened to JMO? Like people aren't gonna play JMO. Like he's gonna fucking kill these guys, right? And everyone's focused on Gibbs and Demont. Laporta's underpriced. By the way, ASB is one of the pay-ups who's like a slight pivot off of Achan, Gibbs, and JT, right? Use Sun God. I think you should be willing and able to play any combination of those 5 skill players as you see fit. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, look at this ownership. Let it pull up. This is Detroit. And it's like, okay, Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown at 20%, and then just like, 10% for everybody else. Like, Jameson Williams is one of those guys who at 4,900, I'm looking at the DraftKings algorithm, like, what did they do in the offseason to like end up with this? 49, we would have flipped our collective lids for a $4,900 Jameson Williams last year. He was routinely high 5s, low 6s. And like Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, what I'll say to that is like, yeah, sometimes playing both centers in a game works, but like they do eat into each other's ceiling at the second standard deviation, maybe not the first standard deviation. Sure, yes, both of them can score 17 to 22 fantasy points, but it's really unlikely both of them score 25 plus fantasy points. And man, if you looked at this slate of running backs and thought to yourself, oh, it's not going to be that likely that a lot of running backs score 25, you're just wrong.
Like it's not just like, are you playing Demont Gibbs together? It's also like, oh, because of that, you're not playing Achan. You're not playing Rachaad White, who like the field for some reason is not playing. Rachaad White is like the one chalky piece. I don't understand why he's not chalky. Like, I think it's because Seattle has a good defense and people are just scared that Rachaad White is going to just be shut down by them. But Rachaad White catches passes, by the way.
I also think, so there's 2 things. One, I think that Rachaad White's ownership is going to be in the 20% range. I'm going to boost it.
Fair enough.
But also, people are like,
also Dowdle. That's why.
And it's Dowdle, and it's Hall, and it's Hampton, and it's like there are like 15 running backs that you can just
but my point remains, which is to your point, like the second standard deviation or the third. Like, yes, can Gibbs and Demont get there? Sure. And is it likely they get there for a single entry? Maybe. But wouldn't you rather just play one of them and then like not play somebody who's inversely correlated with the guy when like 10 other running backs are also great plays? Mm-hmm. So like I will say, like, if you want to do it, I don't really have a huge problem with it. I do think it's weird that like that is what people would decide to do with the Lions game. Like if you're gonna play the Lions game, just play Gibbs and fucking JMO or play Demont and JMO. But I like of all the combinations, like the last one I would play is Gibbs and Demont. Just because just don't play the 2 guys that are inversely correlated with each other. That's all I'm saying.
I will say one more thing about the Demont thing before we move on. Campbell gets his guys, his things, and Dave Montgomery has been very vocal about wanting to do things this week. I'm not usually that guy, right? Like I don't really care that much about narratives, but like Coach Campbell gets his dudes, his things. And I kind of feel like this is a spot where he's going to give David Montgomery the entirety of like full drives and like maybe an extra drive that he doesn't usually get, maybe a couple extra touches that he doesn't usually get in the red zone, right? Like I just think that it's going to work. So I'm not saying that as saying that I think that David Montgomery will be absolutely vital in GPPs tomorrow. I'm saying that I think he probably has a bit of a higher floor than what we generally expect from David Montgomery in this specific matchup. Like he's probably going to score a touchdown, and everybody's going to scream about him being, whatever, dead without David Montgomery, blah, blah, blah. And then, he'll end with 17 and won't be useful because 14 other running backs outscored him. So that's my thoughts on David Montgomery.
Yeah. I think we focused on the critical like ownership games. I mean, the only other game that people are like talking a little bit about is how to approach the Miami Carolina game. And that's That's driven by two injuries, really. Like one is Chuba Hubbard being out, so that makes Dowdle more valuable.
Yeah.
And it also makes people like Tet a little bit more. And Tet has, had a nice year so far. And then on the Miami side, with Tyreek being out, people expect Waddle to have a nice opportunity, which I think is an appropriate expectation. And also Achane, who already has like a enormous role, being even more enormous.
Yeah.
And I don't my feeling on that game is like fine. Like I think I have no problems with any mini correlation you could play. And I think Dowdle, I don't usually like playing running backs across from each other, but Dowdle is cheap enough here where I do think like if you want to play HN and Dowdle together, I think that's totally fine. I will point out that we don't have quite as strong a projection in Dowdle as I've seen elsewhere. By the way, our Dowdle projection looks fucking great. I mean, if you look at his 3x, it's 54%, right? So I'm not saying it's not great, but we have Rachaad White like a touch better. And I also like Rachaad White a touch better. So it makes me happy to pivot to Rachaad White, especially if Rachaad White's going to be a little less on than Dowdle.
Yeah.
And bonus is you can play Rachaad White opposite JSN, who looks like one of the best chalk pieces on the whole slate, JSN. The last thing on positions, I've sort of mentioned that at receiver, you have good value like across the pricing spectrum. At tight end's like the only position that looks a little more concentrated in terms of ownership. Tight end, we have essentially like four main chalk pieces. It's Ferguson, Warren, McBride, and then a little less so Laporta/Ertz, right? So I do think just be aware that if you're playing Warren, McBride, Ferguson, who in the theme of the show all look to have very good ranges of outcomes. If you look at Warren, McBride, Ferguson, like those look like great outcomes. Like I cannot look at any one of those plays and say they're bad shot. Just be aware that I think those five top tight ends, and maybe Mason Taylor, if people want to use him with Fields as like a way to get different with Fields, but I don't think Mason Taylor is going to get steamed a whole lot. I really don't. I think it's going to be those top five. And I don't have a huge problem with them. I think of tight end frequently outside of like ceiling plays, not unlike catcher in baseball, where it's like, if I can make it work as part of my stat or part of my correlation, I prefer to. And so it makes me like Danny Jones a little more because I like Warren. It makes me like using Ferguson across from Fields, although that'll be probably the most common way to use Fields. Some people will use Pickens, but a lot will use Ferguson. But I don't have any problem with any of these guys. I'm just pointing out that those top three and then Laporta, Ertz as kind of like the secondary chalk tier are going to be the guys who get all the.
Yeah. I will say that ownership is going to shake up on tight end a little bit with Bowers out, right? Like whoever
those guys a little bit more.
Yeah, it's going to be, with no Bowers. Let's see who is even the fucking next one for Las Vegas. Michael Mayer, and he paid off his chalk last year. I imagine that we're probably going to end up seeing him with some ownership. But yeah, this is tight end. I think is kind of the one spot where, like on this slate, where chalk is just not really going to dictate what you do. I do want to make 2 points about tight end this week. One, Taysom Hill is back. And my love for New Orleans stacks says that matters. 2, Darren Waller had a great role.
Yes.
In his debut. Like you can see from the expected fantasy points, 12.99 in his debut role.
I think that's a note I meant to make when we talked about HN Waddle, is that like everyone's focused on HN Waddle, totally appropriate because they are going to get the bulk of the volume that Tyreek was getting. But I do not think last week with Waller was just a one-time thing. Like if you think back to last year, do you remember what happened last year? What's his face who was traded to the Steelers? Johnny Smith was like an almost every week play. Mike McDaniel loves his pass catching tight ends in the scheme, and I think he's been waiting for Waller because Waller was brought in late in the offseason and was hurt. And I don't think last week was just a one-time thing. I think Waller is, of all the tight ends we have here, he's the one who sticks out the most to me in terms of inefficient ownership. And it's because I don't think any model, ours or any other model across the industry, has factored in his role into this offense yet with one game.
Yeah. That's where the expected fantasy points column here comes in so clutch. Is that like, yeah, it was just one game, but we can see that his expected fantasy points, like he had a role similar to Tyler Warren and Trey McBride. And that's huge. Like, it's kind of annoying that because of the fucking broken ass DraftKings pricing algorithm, it doesn't matter. But he's like $1,000, $1,200 underpriced. You could say that he should be 4,500 this week, and he's 3,500. So, God forbid we needed a value play, but Darren Waller is right there. As you were speaking to this Miami Carolina game, I just don't care about it really. Like I'm not gonna stack Tua, right? Like I'm not gonna play Bryce Young.
Don't do that. There's no need to do that. People have been saying like Tua, what about Tua? And I'm like, look, I'm a fucking Miami Dolphins supporter, and like I will not have a Tua stack.
You don't need to do that shit. I think one-offs in that game are fine. Like Achane is fine, and Malik Washington is fine, and Darren Waller and Tet. I have no idea how to pronounce his last name, so I'm not going to try. Like like they're all fine. They're all fine plays, but like I don't even look at it as a game environment that I'm worried about. Right? I'm just if I get beat by Bryce Young or Tua on week 5 in 2025, then what the fuck ever.
I'm in the same boat. Like I will have like probably at least one of Achane or Waddle in a couple lineups because I think their role will be good enough. I'm not super excited about Dowdle, but that's mostly because I like Rashad White so much.
Right.
And it's fine. Like it's just it goes back to the point we've made 20 times on this thing, which is you do have the luxury on the slate where there's so much value, you can kind of be picky about your value. Like you can be picky, like just pick the value you like the most and especially from smaller field, it's annoying because it's going to be, I think unless you do something really stupid, you'll have like a decent outcome, but it's going to be really hard to win. It's going to be really hard to win.
Yeah. Yep. And that's why I'll be playing high dollar single entry stuff this week. It's similar to last week, man. Like I look at it and like, I just don't think that there's that much of a reason for me to MME this week.
Yeah.
So that's how
one thing. Late slate is pretty nice. I actually am playing one pretty like nosebleedish entry this week in late slate, which I never do in late slate. Like I usually play like the single entry spy or double spy, like $100, $200 entries.
Yeah.
And late slate's fun because like there's enough differentiation between the Lions and the Chargers where you have to make a couple decisions there. And if anyone's frustrated by like how just do whatever the fuck you want main slate is, check out late slate. It's a pretty fun one. Like it's a nice like mini slate where you can use a little more skill. Can we answer some questions before we make any final points?
Yeah. So let's see. I answered this on YouTube, but what's up, guys? Need some help? Better start Bo Nix or Sam Darnold? I'm gonna say Darnold. I just think that he's a better quarterback. Bo Nix has been bad this year. I think that Denver is in an okay spot, but not like anything great. And I think that Darnold is in a better spot here. I don't. Do you have an opinion on either one of those guys? I don't think you do.
It's not really. I mean, they're both like fine average quarterbacks. Like neither of them is great.
I'll choose Darnold. Let's see, 12-man redraft, half PPR, 2 flex, wide receiver, running back, tight end. So this is a rate my roster 1 to 10. Drake May, Jonty, Dowdell, Ibuka, JSN, Juwan Johnson, Bourne, DeMarcado, bench is Caleb Williams, Bijan, JCM. Yeah, I mean that's good. I'm good with that. I think that May is an upside quarterback at this point. The one spot that I would say you probably are weak at this point is Juwan Johnson. We'll see how Ibuka is with Chris Godwin, but as long as Mike Evans is out, then it doesn't really matter. Overall, though, I think that this is fine. You'll be able to get back in Bijan over Dowdell when the bye week is over. You have Golden, CD's on the IR. Yeah, I would give this probably a 7 or an 8. What about you?
I think it's strong, yeah. I mean, 12-man redraft. I'm in one of those leagues, and begrudgingly because I've tried to get out of all my redrafts. Like my friends will let me. They're like harder to build good teams than people realize. If it's a sharp group, because it's just it's just too many. It's a lot of teams, and this is a pretty deep team for a 12-man team. I give that at least a B plus, A minus. If not, it's a good team.
There we go. Yeah. All right. My main player that I am going to be focused on this week, I think, is probably going to be you go first. You go first.
Well, I'll give you two. The first one I already mentioned, and it's more just like I want exposure to the Lions game. I'll just say that like it's kind of a concept more than it is a player, but I have no problem playing two players in the Lions game. It will likely not be Gibbs Demont, but I have no problem playing any combination of those two guys. I do think JMO is the one guy who seems a little less owned than the others, who I think is really interesting because he's only 4,900. It's a way to get a value at a position in like a price range that people aren't going to be going to. So that's one of mine, which is like my way of getting to the Lions game. Yes, I'll have like some Gibbs just because I think he's one of those ceiling breakers we talked about. But I also don't mind playing Gibbs with JMO or any combination of those 5 flex players we mentioned.
Yeah, okay. I'm into that. My guy this week is going to be Daniel Jones. And like I don't usually
that was gonna be one of mine. That was gonna be and that's one of my 4 lineups to be clear.
Yeah, I don't usually choose a quarterback for this, but I just think that with the amount of leverage that you get by simply playing Daniel Jones on both Jonathan Taylor and Justin Fields, I just think that he's an incredibly valuable play. You could literally play like the same lineup and just swap from Justin Fields to Daniel Jones and instantly gain like a shit ton of relative value over the field. For 5,800, you have Daniel Jones, and we're going to go by median, right? 5,600 is Justin Fields. 5,800 is Daniel Jones, right? Daniel Jones, he's not going to be 13% owned. Sorry, he's just not. I think that he's probably going to be like in the 8 to 10% range because I think more people are going to go, oh, I have Daniel Jones. I can just go to Justin Fields, who's cheaper. And like, I think that people are just going to play way more Justin Fields. There's just so much relative value on Daniel Jones that he's going to be my guy here. And the other part of this that I think is really important is Darren Waller. At 3,500, I do think that he makes for a terrific play, right? If I don't go with New Orleans stack, I think that he makes a lot of sense. Even in the flex, like you could do a double tight end this week if you wanted to pay up everywhere else. I think that would work because of what Darren Waller's role was. So Daniel Jones is my guy, though.
My second one, just because I feel the need to point it out, and this is like a very missionary take, and for all the people who always make fun of me for being a double condom guy, which is not an inappropriate reputation. In DFS, to be clear, not in real life. No commentary, no comment, yes or no on that regard. I do have 3 children. Is Herbert. I just think we're seeing the emergence of Herbert as like a top tier quarterback this year. Harbaugh has a bit of a reputation for being a quarterback maker. It was kind of funny because all the best ball bros were expecting the Chargers to be like this run heavy team. And I think the Chargers are like the #1 PROE this year so far, or near the top. Even now, I will say there's like one little smidgen of concern on my part, which is that they've had all their tackle injured, and Herbert got like fucked up last week. And the Commanders aren't like some amazing defense, but I don't think it's a secret to them. I do think I do have like a little bit of fear that at some point he's going to take a bad enough hit. He's been taking some fucking hits like the last 2 weeks. Not enough to scare me off of him by being one of my 4 lineups, and not enough to scare me off of using like going heavier on late slate because I want a little extra exposure to him. I just think it's also really easy to stack him. You just have to pick 2 of those 3 guys between QJ, Keenan Allen, and Ladd. There's a little bonus there in that Ladd has disappointed people so much so far. And I think he's probably one of your top deltas between expected fantasy points and actual fantasy points so far. I think when I looked at that before, that he stuck out to me in terms of on the receivers. That I also think there's a little bit of bonus for a slightly larger field if you want to use Ladd. His price is totally fair, and he won't be very owned. I mean, he's not going to be unowned, but he's not going to be like owned in any way that would make you nervous to use him. I will probably double condom QJ Allen, to be clear. But I just think Herbert for all those reasons. The last bonus reason for Herbert is that because Fields is such good value and because people want to play cheaper quarterbacks, well, at 6,100, he's not expensive. He's expensive enough where I think it's going to keep his ownership in check. Like, I think he'll be in that 5 to 10% range. I don't think he's going to be over 10 to 15% max, which makes me like him a little more.
Absolutely agree. Good points. All right. I think we got to cut this one. Pablo's got things to do. And
happy birthday, Mom.
Oh, happy birthday. Happy birthday, Pablo Mom. This is going to be a good week. I think it's going to be a high scoring week, but as long as you're happy to eat some chalk this week and just do it in an interesting way, we should be fine. If you enjoyed this content and if you would like to, support me and support Paydirt, come over and grab a subscription over at paydirtdfs.com. We have a $40 a month option, which gets you the entire site. We have $225 for yearly through the end of the NFL season, or $20 for a week, $5 for a day. You get access to all of the different models for all of the different sports, different contest sims, different portfolio manager, articles, all that kind of stuff. If you're not already in the Discord, come jump in the Discord. You can find a link right here under the information. Otherwise, thanks for showing up. Thanks for hanging out. And hopefully one of us takes down a Millie Maker spot with the Paydirt logo up top. I'm James. This is Pablo. Thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.
Good luck.